Welcome to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. So the Ross Ulbricht trial started yesterday in New York City in the federal court for the Southern District of New York. And, well, there was quite a bombshell that was dropped by the defense attorney of all people. There were also protests that happened outside, and the protest may have actually been the bigger story than the bombshell that was dropped. And yes, I realize that this is Wednesday. This is supposed to be the Ask Me Anything. However, with the Silk Road trial, or actually the Ross Ulbricht trial starting yesterday, I do feel compelled to speak about that and report on what happened. So there's a story here from Wired about the bombshell that was dropped by Ross Ulbricht's attorney. The story begins, it says, for the past year, the FBI and federal prosecutors have told and retold the story of how Ross Ulbricht created, owned, and operated the massive anonymous online drug empire known as the Silk Road. But as his trial began Tuesday, Ulbricht's defense lawyers, for the first time, told their version of that story, and while theirs also begins with Ulbricht creating the Silk Road, it ends with Ulbricht being framed by the real operators of the site, whom he had handed over control. In the opening statement in the Manhattan courtroom, defense attorney Joshua Draytell began with a surprising admission that his client, Ross Ulbricht, was in fact the founder of the Silk Road. But Draytell went on to explain that the site was meant merely to be a kind of economic experiment that Ulbricht only controlled for a brief time. The eventual adoptive owners of the Silk Road, Draytell claimed, would later trick Ulbricht into serving as a fall guy when they sensed an impending law enforcement crackdown. Draytell told the jury, after a few months, he found it too stressful for him and he handed it over to others. At the end, he was lured back by those operators to take the fall for the people running the website. Ross Ulbricht was not a drug dealer. He was not a kingpin. The story here continues. It says, that news story describing Ulbricht as a patsy for the powerful online drug lords who operated the Silk Road at its peak won't be an easy sell. In its own opening statement, the prosecution described powerful evidence against Ulbricht that includes proof that the FBI caught him logged into a Silk Road administrator panel in the San Francisco Public Library last year, and a journal and logbook found on his laptop that detailed his activities running the Silk Road. Assistant U.S. Attorney Timothy Howard also said in his statement that Ulbricht at one point confessed to running the Silk Road to an old college friend. That purported personal breach of Ulbricht's secrecy represents a damaging new claim from the prosecution, and Howard said that the college friend would be serving as a witness in the trial. So since they mention the witness, or at least one of the witnesses in the trial, it's important to note that Ross Ulbricht's attorney did not get the witness list until Friday. So you can do the math, Friday to Tuesday. If you count both days as full days, that's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. That's 5 days. In reality, that's barely 3. That is barely 3 days that Ross Ulbricht and his attorney had a chance to know who was going to testify against Ross Ulbricht in this trial. One of the witnesses is another alleged administrator who went by the name Inigo. Now, I don't know the details of that, but generally, when you have somebody who is, in essence, a co-defendant, although I realize that the charges weren't filed jointly, so it's not exactly a co-defendant. But when you have, someone who is basically a co-defendant, they're accused of pretty much the same thing as you, of being a partner with you in something, and that person winds up being a witness against you, that's generally not a good thing. So hopefully, I've heard, and I was not given details at all, but I was told that it's not actually as bad as it appears. So hopefully that's true, and hopefully we'll find out in the next 4 to 6 weeks, which is how long this trial is expected to last. The article here continues. It says, as the alleged administrator of the Silk Road, known as the Dread Pirate Roberts, Ulbricht faces charges including narcotics, money laundering, and hacking conspiracies. But Tuesday's opening statement shows that the trial will center around proving that Ulbricht is in fact the Dread Pirate Roberts. The Silk Road, after all, used the anonymity software Tor and the cryptocurrency Bitcoin expressly to hide users' identities, and the trial could be a case study in how law enforcement cuts through those layers of technological obfuscation or fails to do so. Draytel, Ulbricht's defense attorney, says the internet is a strange place. People can create and fabricate profiles for themselves and others. As Draytel told it, Ulbricht had long given up control of the Silk Road by the time he was arrested and charged with running the site, but as the site's initial creator, he was the perfect fall guy. Draytel said he told the jury he would present evidence that the real Dread Pirate Roberts paid for information about law enforcement investigations that focused on him, including information that they had possibly learned his real name, and that name is not Ross Ulbricht. The new operators of the Silk Road had been alerted the walls were closing in, and Draytel says that's what compelled the Dread Pirate Roberts to put his escape plan into action, framing Ulbricht. In Draytel's version of events, Ulbricht's store of Bitcoin was simply the earnings from his early investments in the cryptocurrency, not Silk Road profits as the prosecution alleges. He points out that the Bitcoin seized from Ulbricht are only a small fraction of the full $18 million the U.S. government has said the Dread Pirate Roberts earned in Silk Road commissions. As he implied that the evidence found on Ulbricht's computer at the time of his arrest was falsified to leave him holding the bag when the real operator of the Silk Road knew their time was up. He did not elaborate on how evidence could have planted, or rather, how evidence could have been planted on Ulbricht's computer. There's more on this, as well as the protest and how the protest could possibly affect the trial of Ross Ulbricht. We'll get into that when we come back on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. Hi, I'm Darryl W. Perry, and I need your help to take Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on the road. In the spirit of Motorhome Diaries and Liberty on Tour, I intend to take the message of peace, love, and liberty on the road. I intend to leave New Hampshire at the conclusion of the New Hampshire Liberty Forum and return at the beginning of PorcFest. During the 104-day trip, I'll be visiting at least 10 cities across the country, speaking to people about the ideas of peace, love, and liberty, while continuing to produce daily Liberty media. Pensacola, Florida, Austin, Texas, Sedona, Arizona, and Denver, Colorado are already on the map. If you have a college group, a local Liberty on the Rocks, or other Liberty meetup that you'd like me to visit, you can possibly add your event to my calendar. To find out more about the tour or to donate, visit tour.fppradio.com. That's tour.fppradio.com. You can support FPP Radio by joining the Fans program. Fans are friends, allies, and Numery supporters. Fans help FPP afford to produce more original content. You can join the Fans program for as little as $3 per month or any amount of Bitcoin per month, thanks to the recurring payment options provided by Coinbase. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com. That's fans.fppradio.com. Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. I'll get back to the story from Wired about the Ross Ulbricht trial in just a second. But if you're looking for gold or silver and you want to make that purchase with Bitcoin, you can do that with Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. For over 35 years, Roberts & Roberts has been a trusted source for buying and selling your investment-grade precious metals, and they take Bitcoin for precious metals purchases and have permanently removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid with Bitcoin. Give them a call today for some knowledgeable advice on investing and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. 850-478-5270 or online at rrbi.co. The story here from Wired.com says that Draytel, that's Ross Ulbricht's attorney, Draytel asked the jury, the Dread Pirate Roberts is someone who studiously avoided revealing his identity to anyone on the site. This same person goes to a public library and uses a public Wi-Fi connection. That Ross is DPR is a contradiction so fundamental that it defies common sense. Draytel added, the real Dread Pirate Roberts is out there. But even if, Wired reports, even if Draytel can cast doubt on evidence like Ulbricht's purported logbook and diary, Draytel's narrative has serious flaws that will no doubt be seized upon by the prosecution. The prosecution's opening statement promised to show evidence that the Silk Road was advertised on drug forums as a way to buy narcotics from its earliest days. Since its initial criminal complaint against Ulbricht, the FBI has claimed it can prove that Ulbricht wrote the message on those forums advertising the Silk Road. In his opening statement, Prosecutor Timothy Howard stressed that the government will prove that Ulbricht was not only the Silk Road's creator, but the central operator of the site who exerted sole control over it and its staff of 10. He quoted a message from Dread Pirate Roberts in the early days of the Silk Road forums. I am Silk Road the marketplace, the person, the enterprise, everything, end quote. Perhaps the most significant new evidence in Howard's statement was his claim that Ulbricht confessed to running the site to a college friend who helped him with programming. That confession would represent the first claim that Ulbricht confided his Silk Road secret to anyone and also contradicts Draytel's claim that Ulbricht had cut ties with the site and handed over control to other operators. According to Howard, Ulbricht called the as-yet unnamed friend for programming advice multiple times in 2010 and 2011. After initially refusing to tell the friend about the nature of the site and describing it as top secret, Howard says that Ulbricht ultimately caved and revealed his ownership of the Silk Road. Howard says he showed him the Silk Road and he bragged that he was the mastermind behind the entire thing. The debate about whether Dread Pirate Roberts created the Silk Road or merely inherited it, however, could be reignited by Draytel's argument. The author of this article says, when I interviewed the Dread Pirate Roberts in July 2013, he claimed he had actually purchased the Silk Road from its creator after helping him to patch a security flaw in the site, saying, quote, I didn't start the Silk Road. My predecessor did. I was in the corner from early on, and eventually it made sense for me to take over the reins. So it does seem, and this is me speaking, not the author of this article, it does seem as though there's some evidence that even if Ross Ulbricht created the Silk Road, which he has, through his attorney, now confessed to having done, that he handed the site over to someone because there's the interview from the Wired editor. And hopefully the defense will be able to, or I didn't mean to say editor, but the contributor here to Wired, and hopefully the defense will be able to get this person as a witness to testify. And, of course, the prosecution is going to object and say, well, the hearsay, this is hearsay. But there, could be the potential that they can present evidence. But again, I think that the prosecution is going to object to any kind of evidence as hearsay unless it is Ross Ulbricht himself testifying. And I don't know if that's going to happen. It might, since his attorney has already said, yes, he created the site. So, maybe Ross Ulbricht will wind up over the next 4 to 6 weeks, however long this trial goes. Ross Ulbricht might wind up on the witness stand to testify on his own behalf. And hopefully, the worst of the charges, the Kingpin statute, as well as some of the others, wind up being thrown out. And I know that there were some people that, regardless of the facts of this case, were hoping that the jury would find Ross Ulbricht not guilty. And what some of these protesters, and I don't know if I should necessarily call them protesters, some were protesting the trial, some were passing out jury nullification information. So what they were doing, and they were not in any way working together because of jury tampering laws and racketeering laws, but they knew that the others were going to be there. So the people that were there with signs that read, "Web hosting is not a crime, WTF," and "life in prison for running a website, WTF," those people were not working in conjunction with the people passing out jury nullification information. But they did know that, each group knew that the others were going to be there. There's a story from The Guardian, and there's actually more on the Wired story, but I definitely want to cover the protest and how the protest could possibly affect the trial itself. The story here comes from The Guardian, and it says, protesters gathered at a Manhattan court building on Tuesday in support of Ross Ulbricht, whose trial began for the accused mastermind behind what was once the Internet's biggest illegal drugs marketplace, with the hearing beginning at the federal court inside. Federal prosecutors accused Ulbricht, who allegedly went by the name Dread Pirate Roberts, of being the owner and manager of the deep web marketplace. The story, I'm just going to skip through some of the stuff that has basically been rehashed or hashed previously in the Wired article. According to the indictment, Ulbricht himself reaped tens of millions of dollars in commission. He is also charged with involvement in conspiracy to commission 6 hits, including against a former Silk Road employee. And that is important, even though this is not one of the charges in New York. But it's important. I'll tell you why when we come back on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. During the 2013 Porcupine Freedom Festival, Davi Barker presented an idea for a renegade psychological experiment. Since then, he has refined his idea and put his plan and research into writing. He explains, "We aim to show the world beyond a shadow of a doubt that power corrupts absolutely and corrupt authority deserves no obedience." Authoritarian Sociopathy is available from Amazon.com, all major bookstores, and now available as an audiobook. Hi, I'm Darryl W. Perry, and I need your help to take Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on the road. In the spirit of Motorhome Diaries and Liberty on Tour, I intend to take the message of peace, love, and liberty on the road. I intend to leave New Hampshire at the conclusion of the New Hampshire Liberty Forum and return at the beginning of Porkfest. During the 104-day trip, I'll be visiting at least 10 cities across the country, speaking to people about the ideas of peace, love, and liberty, while continuing to produce daily Liberty media. Pensacola, Florida, Austin, Texas, Sedona, Arizona, and Denver, Colorado are already on the map. If you have a college group, a local Liberty on the Rocks, or other Liberty meetup that you'd like me to visit, you can possibly add your event to my calendar. To find out more about the tour or to donate, visit tour.fppradio.com. That's tour.fppradio.com. Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. The story here from The Guardian continues. It says, in court, Ulbricht, clean-shaven and dressed smartly in a dark blazer and beige slacks, sat confidently beside his legal team. Occasionally, he turned to flash a smile at his mother, Lynn, who was in the public gallery. Ulbricht has consistently claimed that he was not the Dread Pirate Roberts and denies all the charges against him. Outside the courtroom, protesters had gathered in support of Ulbricht. Derek J. Freeman, who has been on this show in the past and who runs Peace News and Peace News Now, as well as several other shows, he was there to demonstrate outside the court. He told The Guardian he thought it would set a dangerous precedent if a website can be prosecuted for what its users do, saying, quote, "If so, drag Craigslist off to prison." The article from The Guardian says, in its heyday, Silk Road was a sprawling marketplace where people used Bitcoin to purchase a galaxy of different stimulants, hallucinogenics, opiates, and prescription drugs. In July 2013, it was estimated that transactions on the Silk Road could be upwards of $30 to $45 million per day, and the indictment states that the site had well over 100,000 buyers worldwide. It operated on the Tor network, a web anonymizing service originally developed by the U.S. Naval Research Center and partly funded by DARPA as a way of protecting government communications. For Freeman, The Guardian writes, if Ulbricht actually is the Dread Pirate Roberts, he is a pioneer of the deep web and a hero, saying, he brought the black market online. There's no fear of drive-by shootings or back alley stabbings. So why is it important to know what happened, that there were protesters there, and that the prosecution, even though Ulbricht is not facing the charge of the supposed murder for hire in New York, why then did the prosecution bring it up, and what does that have to do with the protest? Well, the judge in this case, Catherine Forrest, said that if the protest continued, that she would make the jury anonymous, meaning that they would be sequestered, they'd stay in a hotel, they would be transported from the hotel to the court, they would have no access to the outside world, they would be brought into the courthouse through some secret entrance. And what does that have to do with the protesters? Well, the jury would not be told that the sequester or the anonymizing was being done because of the protesters. They would not be told why they were being sequestered or anonymized, which could possibly mean that some of the jurors would come to their own conclusion of, wait a second, the prosecution is saying that this guy put a hit out on people. We're being kept protected. Maybe he's trying to put a hit out on us. We have to send this guy away to jail forever. Well, what did the protesters decide to do? And what did the people handing out pamphlets decide to do? Well, there's a post from Jim Babb, who was one of the people that organized the jury nullification pamphleting, and he posted on Facebook, and I will post this in the show notes so you can read it for yourself and take part in the conversation if you want. It says the Philly crew made sure that pedestrian traffic at both courthouse entrances was saturated with pamphlets promoting juror rights. Starting before 7:30 a.m. on January 13th, 6 of us endured Arctic conditions to distribute pamphlets for FIJA and the Jury Rights Project. Response from the public seemed favorable. Most people accepted our handouts. Media attention in the morning was extensive, but our focus was on pamphleting. We might have missed some media opportunities while focusing on the primetime court traffic. We were joined midday by Manhattan libertarian Jim Lizinski. Though unrelated, the Free Ross camp kicked butt with great signage. Here's the interesting part. At the end of the day, we received a report from someone who had attended the trial. Evidently, despite the millions of dollars spent and incalculable power of the state, Judge Catherine Forrest feared that a few folks with pamphlets could upset their steamrolling operation. As predicted, a juror with a conscience and knowledge of their power terrifies those petty tyrants. The billboard campaign and the pamphleting operation were referenced on multiple occasions. Selecting an uninformed jury became the top priority for the prosecution and their subservient judge. He says, I must give credit to the craftiness of Judge Catherine Forrest. Instead of brutalizing and attempting to entrap the pamphleteers, as they did to Julian Heiklin, she chose to threaten a defendant. Basically, she decreed that if the independent volunteers did not stop informing jurors of their right to nullify an unjust and misapplied law, she would anonymize the jury, bussing them in from a secret location, blocking their contact from the outside world. Of course, the jurors won't be told they are being protected from a 100% factual pamphlet and that they're indisputable, and about their indisputable rights. Instead, they will thank the judge for protecting them from a dangerous crime boss. Experts have confirmed that this is a credible threat. Although the pamphleting operation is independent of any particular case, the last thing we want to do is make life harder on any defendant. We now have a traditional hostage standoff. Do we storm the villain's hideout, stall for time, or retreat? After careful consideration, we have decided to postpone the pamphleting operation until the hostage is safely recovered. However, the offending judge will not be forgotten. She will become accustomed to dealing with informed jurors. We will not be intimidated. We will not abandon our mission. Forrest grumpiness confirms that what we already knew. They are scared of the truth. They fear for their house of cards. Pamphleting at the court will resume at a later date. The kiosk ad campaign will continue. If you want to help expand it, you can participate by going to juryrightsproject.com/NYC. And, I almost forgot to mention, since Jim Babb did mention that she was scared of the pamphlets and the pamphleteers, there was a report from someone inside the court that when they were calling for people, calling potential jurors, they asked the question, did you see the protesters outside? Did you see a pamphlet? If the person answered in the affirmative, they were dismissed. However, people who had previously worked for the government or who have family members who have worked for the government were not dismissed, only asked, will this interfere in you making a fair judgment? State 1, freedom 0. This is Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online, fppradio.com.